Thomas Cole, the Hudson River School, you know, yeah, the gallery was on Wall Street and Broadway where he first started selling his paintings. But he had gone up to the Catskills having read Washington Irving, and he wanted to see these places, and he painted them. And that lit the fire for people to start going up there. And then the railroads got involved,
Yeah.
and they got the fish. Yeah, they would stock the lakes with fish to get fishermen. All this is fascinating stuff to go up there. And the railroads would, if you wanted to build a cabin or a house, better yet, a house up there, the railroads would transport your lumber for free.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So it is really the development of New York State.
Oh, yeah.
That, you know, Catskills were responsible.
Welcome to Inside the Line, the Catskills. This episode is brought to you by Scenic Route Guiding. If you're ready to hit the trails, make sure you take the scenic route. Our guides are here to help you with your goals, big or small. Check out the Scenic Route Guiding and gear rentals on Instagram and Facebook for more information. Also, if you mention the podcast, you can get 10% off. Use the code Mountain Lion. Mountain Lion. Mountain Lion. So, Stephen, let's start this off.
Sure.
With a little interesting fact that I found online. So a lot of theories, I don't know if you know this already, a lot of theories are about the name Catskills, where it come from, you know, what it has to do. I found this online. Hopefully this is true. Some say that the Catskills have nothing to do with cats being killed, but that was derived from the Dutch, right? The Catskills, you see the paws signs all over there.
No animals were harmed in the naming of this mountain.
Exactly. So it was actually brought from the Dutch, that word Catskill means Wildcat Creek. They settled in the 17th century, so that maybe explain it. Some people think about bobcats, and you know, there's a lot of bobcats there. You actually get to see on most of the road signs has a Catskill Park sign with a bobcat or a mountain lion paw print, which mountain lions is a big topic that I got to get into later on. Huge topic. So many years ago, some people think that the ship that went up the Hudson River called the Cat gave the place called the Catskills for some reason. So it's a bunch of different theories.
Yeah.
We don't know. Some people still call the Catskills Kaatskil, Catskill or Catskill. So pretty cool stuff I found online. I'm trying to start every episode differently.
All right. And you know not to believe everything you read online.
That's true.
But if it's published in a book, oh my God, then it's the Bible.
If it's published in a book,
I'm pulling your leg. Be dubious of what you read online.
Yeah. I will try. So welcome everyone to episode 25 of Inside the Line, the Catskills. Tonight, I have a special guest, Stephen M. Silverman, who wrote the book that I have right here, The Catskills, Its History and How It Changed America. Very inspiring book that I read basically when I first started hiking in the Catskills, because its history is so fascinating in the Catskills. So say hi, Stephen.
Thank you. No, thank you. And boy, it's a heavy book to be taking with you when you're hiking.
Good call. Oh man, I mean, I might as well, right? It has a lot of great. If you guys got,
thank you.
Yeah, all the listeners, check it out.
Now, if I may say, my publisher was Alfred A. Knopf, known to do nice books. They did a beautiful job with it. I was really, the first time I saw the layouts, I had no idea it was going to be so beautiful. They really went to town. They went to town with a book about the mountains. But an author, I was extremely pleased. So,
oh yeah,
thank you.
It's very fascinating, and it brings a lot of knowledge about the Catskills, about a lot of topics that a lot of people don't know about the Catskills. You know, they might just be hiking and they don't know that this place is really did what changed America.
Well, what's funny is, see, you say hiking, and for me, my business, I was a show business reporter for years, and I started People Magazine's website, and I was the chief entertainment writer before that for the New York Post. So when I told people I was writing a book on the Catskills, everyone assumed I was writing simply about the Borscht Belt comics.
Yep.
And that was that. So boy, were they shocked when they opened the book and found Thomas Cole and Washington Irving and James Fenimore Cooper. And yes, indeed, Jenny Grossinger. And yes, indeed, all the natural resources that are up there. But that was a nice surprise when the book came out.
It doesn't hold just the Borscht Belt. It holds a history of everything, which is insane. It's crazy, and I love it. I love reading it. So excellent. So thank you to our sponsor, Scenic Route Guiding. Thank you once again. Thank you to our monthly subscribers, Katrina Weinig, Darren White, John Comiskey, Vicky Ferreira, and John C. Thank you guys very much for donating monthly. Really appreciate it. I don't know if you having anything to drink tonight, like water, alcohol, anything. I always ask this question.
Of me?
Yeah.
I have everything. What do you want?
Oh, I'm having a good old rum and Coke.
No, I'm doing this dry. What can I say? If
you can give a shout out to any local brewery you know up here, I'll put it in the notes and have people check it out. Do you know anything?
I do. It's gone. I bought a vodka up there.
Oh,
yeah.
It's the one in Arkville.
I did a talk, but remember the book came out in 2015, so of course that bottle of vodka's gone. But no, and I'm not a beer drinker.
Yeah. I mean,
so,
it's just a question I ask anybody on the show. It's
no, but when I am up there, I always buy bottles of the local stuff and give them as presents.
Yeah.
I believe me. My doctor said, "What do you drink?" I said, "Vodka in summer, scotch in winter, and champagne for breakfast." So I do imbibe, but right now, no.
Not today. I have to have a little bit of alcohol in me to get me a little bit more jumpy and a little bit more fun.
No, I have friends who spike their coffee in the morning.
Good for them.
Don't judge.
I don't do that going to work, by the way. If any of my coworkers listen to that, it's not going to work. Excellent. So usually I do, I don't know if you've previously listened, but I do Catskill history, a segment of Catskill history. I don't have anything tonight because we're going to talk a lot about Catskill history. So I definitely I've been reading some interesting books more about the hiking aspects and where the names came of and hiking, like the Dimmy Doll and Notch, stuff like that. So I can't wait to get into that.
All right. I don't want to cut you off at the knees, but I'm not a hiker.
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I've interviewed people who are not hikers here, and it doesn't matter. If you love the Catskills, and that's all that matters. I'm
a city boy, period. The publisher came to me and said, "You should do a book on the Catskills." And I said, "You're out of your mind. I'm the wrong person. I'm not. I admire nature. I live over Battery Park. I can look down on it. I take my dog there." But my editor actually has a house in Calicut. She said, no, you're going to find there were such eccentric people up there.
Yeah. And
that's what you're great at. And the book will benefit from that. And I've reminded her of this. And she said, as she would, yes, and I was right.
Yeah.
So it was the people I focused on. It's the people that drew me in. And, everyone from Jenny Grossinger. I mean, Henry Hudson. I didn't know that much about him. I didn't know what a tyrant he was.
Yeah.
So it was the people who got me up there.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. So let's
the word.
Yeah.
Particularly the gangsters, they were my favorites. But all right, go ahead. This is the problem with interviewing a journalist. I ask questions too, but go ahead.
Please ask questions because I need some more content because I came up with some questions, but
that's fine.
I like to go as long as I can.
We'll fill the time. In fact, how much time are we filling?
Whatever you want. If you have a time limit, you can go.
I've started a new book and I have to interview someone at 6:00.
Okay. Yeah. We'll be done before then.
I figured.
Definitely. So, let's go to guest of the night, Stephen M. Silverman, and he is the author of The Catskills, Its History and How It Changed America. great to have you here, Stephen. So introduce yourself, Stephen, maybe a little bit background about yourself, everything, because I read your background on Wikipedia and it is impressive. I'm nervous.
Then you know how old I am. I've been a writer and author and journalist my entire career. I grew up in Los Angeles, so I did not go to the Borscht Belt in its heyday. I came to New York to go to Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, and I saw that, hey, this is the center of the world and no parents. So I'm staying in New York City, which is what I've done. And as I name dropped earlier, I was fresh out of school practically. I was the chief entertainment writer for the New York Post. And I met everyone, and I wrote for every magazine, and book publishers started asking me to write books, and I did. And before the Catskills, I wrote the biography of the great British film director David Lean, who made Lawrence of Arabia and The Bridge on the River Kwai. And Dr. Zhivago and Katharine Hepburn wrote my introduction. Anyway, after those books, People magazine offered me a job. I started their website, and I worked at Time Inc. as an editor for 20 years. Yeah, in that period, my book publisher, Knopf, came to me and suggested, why don't you, look at the Catskills? And I scoffed. There was to have been a documentary put together by the wonderful film director, Joan Micklin Silver, and her husband, Ray Silver, and they had interviewed some people in preparation for the documentary. Never got made, and unfortunately, they both passed on.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah. So there were initially a few transcripts with John Conway, wonderful historian of Sullivan County, and just a real gentleman, and some academic types. But I sort of got a round picture of things. But now I had to dig in, and it took 7 years. Wow. In fact, and I'd never written anything so long in my life. I was writing celebrity news bulletins and obituaries for People magazine, basically, and some of them are still running. My Betty White obituary recently, I was told, was the most read article in the 27-year history of People.com. Anyway, that's my celebrity connection, and thanks to the Catskills, I've lectured all over the country, and it's been wonderful. And at the end, what I find, and it's very funny, at the end during the question and answer period, there are really no questions. It's really people wanting.
I lost Stephen for a couple seconds there, so sorry.
And one night, an MC said, look, no comments. Unless you have a question for Stephen, don't ask it. So this woman who had said, yeah, well, my Aunt Sadie met my Uncle Morris at Grossinger's. So the MC said, do you have a question? And the woman said, yes. Did you know my Uncle Morris met my Aunt Sadie at Grossinger's? So I've had great fun and have met some colorful people as a result of working on this book, for which I'm grateful. And, I get to talk to people like you long after I've published. Since Catskills came out, I've published 2 other books. One was the history of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. That was a short book. But Macy's came to me and asked if I would do it. And I said, I can't say no. That would be like saying no to Santa Claus. Yeah. And then, knock on wood, the Catskills book did well. And the publisher said, you want to do the Adirondacks? I said, no, you got it. I'm not a nature boy. Well, what do you like? And it took me a week, but I realized I like the amusement parks. Mm-hmm. So my last book, and this is the other big lecture I give around the country, is on the 900-year history of amusement parks around the world. So that's my background. Wow. I'm working on a new book. I can't say what it is, but like the David Lean book, it's about a giant figure. Interesting. Cool. I'm excited. And thank you for that amazing background. And I got to admit, a lot of people who don't hike do ask a lot of questions about the Borscht Belt, especially me. I got to admit, these people don't hike, they eat. Oh, yeah. And that was a big part in the book that you said, is just like, it was all about the food and the entertainment. Yeah.
and we'll
Yeah,
definitely get into that later. I mean,
okay, good.
Borscht Belt is one of it's a fascinating area. You can't deny that.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and speaking of fascinating, I have seriously been fascinated with this book ever since I bought it. I read it thoroughly. It kept me up at night because just page after page goes into more depth of the Catskills. It starts with Henry Hudson in 1609, and then it ends in modern day stuff at Bethel Woods and fracking and different things like that. Covers everything. It's great. Tanning. I hate to say it. I don't know if I'm doing copyright infringement, but most of my history
infringe away.
Most of my history comes from your book, and I mention your name every time. So,
thank you.
I love it. I love opening the page. Right there is a piece that I can put in there. Like I think I just did one about the Rip Van Winkle play. And that was fast. I did not know that. He was
our first big stage star in a way.
Yeah.
And our first fictional hero.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
And he lived in the Catskills. Where else?
I didn't know they did a huge play on him, and it lasted so long and grew too much advertisement. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so how did you kind of explained it earlier, a tiny bit. How did you come about writing this book? Remember you saying an editor asked.
Well, I was approached, and then I was given the Silver's transcripts, which didn't provide enough information. So then I just dug in. I hit every library. If I ran across a fact, I needed an explanation. It would lead me to another fact. I had the basic outline. I knew that Washington Irving and James Fenimore Cooper were instrumental, and Thomas Cole in their way, whether they were painting or writing short stories. In Washington Irving's case, it being Rip Van Winkle, or with James Fenimore Cooper, Last of the Mohicans and the Pathfinder series. Mm-hmm. All that publicized the Catskills and got public attention and public curiosity as far as England. And travel writers would come over, and then in 1824 you get the Catskill Mountain House. That there had never been anything like it on the planet. And I mean, just to look at that architectural wonder and think, how the hell did they get the materials up there?
Exactly.
What did they feed, the people? What did the people do up there? So what was interesting, public perception of the Catskills after World War II was that this was a Jewish resort. This is where the Jews from New York City went to escape summer heat, and it was Jewish. Well, starting in 1824, when the Catskill Mountain House opened, there was mandatory Sunday church services, and that was a subtle way of excluding Jews. Mm-hmm. And the Catskills, until about 1900, were what you call restricted.
Yep.
No Jews. It was for white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, period. Laborers were allowed to come in, but they weren't treated very well. They certainly weren't the guests. They certainly weren't the landowners. So the Catskills had that history, that big conflict, and the big question, how did it become so Jewish? And there is an answer to that. So, all that was in the research of the book.
Mm-hmm. And then basically, you went, was this like hours upon hours and upon hours of research? You have to remember,
I had a full-time job the whole time.
Yep. And
so this was weekends, vacations, after hours. I didn't have much of a social life.
Well, it's all about, the history. You'd hit one thing and then you'd dig further, and then it
would trigger another point in history to be reached. So once there was an outline of the book, I would fill in with stories, and I'd show them to my editor, who it's my natural inclination to be cynical. And she said, no, you're taking the wrong attitude. Be positive about this. All this is an upbeat, whether it's the invasion of the gangsters up there, which really led to colorful stories, and is my favorite chapter. To even, at one point when the Borscht Belt was abandoned, the Catskills took a downturn.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just as I was wrapping up the book, the upturn was happening full force. And
Yeah.
I wasn't, because my nose had been glued to the keyboard, I wasn't that keenly aware of it.
Mhm.
And she brought that all to my attention. So the major rewriting that was done right before publication was all the end of the book, because things are looking up now, even since the publication of the book. Now real estate prices are expensive. People wanted to escape the city because of COVID.
Yep.
That's a whole new addendum to the
Yeah.
book. So it was never boring. I'll say that.
Yeah, exactly. That's why, when I read the book, I couldn't put it down, because
Thank you.
one point led to another. And I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. I did not know this. And then it just kept going and going and going. It still does. My thoughts of the Catskills and new stuff that gets dug up is just absolutely phenomenal. And I'm very glad that you wrote this book, because it's so crazy. It's so cool to read, and it's cool to read over, because I might have missed something again.
Well,
and like you said, like now you're talking about the gangster stuff. I might go back and read about the gangsters now.
I love them.
Okay, I'm gonna.
I hate to say, especially the killer was wonderful. And this guy, all the hotels had slot machines, and the police would only raid before the tourist season began in summer. They do a mock raid. Everybody, the gangsters were paying off the cops, so they really didn't raid them. There'd be a slot machine, and one guy who was supposed to have been collecting the money from the slot machines was skimming and keeping some of it. So, they took him for a ride, literally, and they killed him. And the driver of the car thought that the killer was going to come after him. He escaped. And where does he go? But he goes to Hollywood, and he gets a job as an actor in movies. And the cops are watching it. Specifically, it was the Barbara Stanwyck, William Holden movie, Golden Boy, which is about a fighter. And this killer is ringside, and they see him in the middle of the screen. So they subpoena him. They bring him back for trial. Well, it turns out he's acquitted because all the witnesses have been murdered.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, but it's amusing in its way. That Schultz was up there. He had to escape.
Yep.
He killed 2 patrons in his nightclub at 55th Street and Broadway, the Hotsy Totsy Club. So his brother, who had tuberculosis, lived in Accra, and Legs moved up there and was sort of a local Robin Hood, unless, again, you crossed him and he'd kill you.
Schultz is the one that buried something.
Dutch Schultz. Did I say Dutch Schultz before? Because I meant Legs Diamond.
Okay.
Legs Diamond was the one who killed the nightclub. Dutch Schultz was rubbed out in Newark, and as he was dying in the hospital emergency room, was running a fever and started talking about millions that he'd left buried in the Catskills. So supposedly, it's either still there, or I suspect if it was, somebody found it, but who the hell was going to report it? Because you'd have to tell the IRS.
Yep. Bring that stuff to Switzerland.
Yeah, get out fast. You like mountains? Go to Switzerland.
And banks.
Right. So that was my favorite chapter, because I was awestruck with with just about everybody. I mean, I didn't know James Fenimore Cooper was such a disagreeable person in person, and that Washington Irving was. His parents wanted him to be a lawyer. He wanted to be a writer. That I like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And he gave us Rip Van Winkle and the Headless Horseman, which isn't in the Catskills, but it's on the way.
Yep, it's on the way. It's right on the outside of the Catskills. So, so this is you broke down it before. Not even, you didn't break down the geological history, but you broke down almost everything of the history. So what inspired you to break it down so categorically. Like it was
no, I'll give you the honest answer. I was insecure. I don't, I thought, well, if I cover everything, then I haven't left anything out.
yeah.
And I knew nothing. And which is good and bad.
No.
But it forced me to use every research tool I had, and also to share what were the better stories.
Yeah. So to be honest, 2000, I started hiking the Catskills 2015.
Right.
I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about it. So, I mean, I'm just like you. I lived right up here for all my life, and I never really knew anything about the place that was an hour and a half away from me. That's really sad.
But you always hiked.
I hiked outside of the Catskills, correct?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So to all honesty, to all the listeners, I am not a Catskill hardcore native. I've just started doing this 2015, but I fell in love with it, and I just did all crazy stuff with it. I read his book, I've hiked, I've dug deep. So I'm
how
with
are
you.
the Catskills different from all other hiking trails?
So I have been mostly all over the United States, I would have to say. I've been into like South Carolina, North Carolina, Arizona, Western Canada, California. The Catskills are very underappreciated, number one. And number two, they're a little bit more rugged than people think they are. So
yes, that was true from the very beginning.
Exactly. So like, of course, Devil's Path is crazy. But people will see these little gains and they're like, oh, that's nothing. That's not like the Adirondacks where it's 5,000 feet. No, not at all. There's complicated places, especially in the winter, that get seriously complicated. And I've found the Catskills to be underappreciated, number one. And plus also the history of the Catskills is still there. Stuff is still sitting there from back in 400 years ago. So, but yeah, I mean, I think the Catskills are underappreciated, and they still have their history intact, which is a lot different than any other place. Because it's just the history is still sitting there. The stone walls are still sitting there from 100, 200 years ago. And then like you said, 400 years ago, Henry Hudson came over here. There's still stuff from the Catskill Mountain House a little bit. And that's what fascinates me about the Catskills when you're hiking in there, because you can still find remnants of 40, 50, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. So quite a big question, not big question, but still big question. How long did it take you to do this? Because this is a lot of stuff.
I think it was 7 years.
Wow.
And what shocked me is, once I finished it, I then could go out and see my friends again. And boy, had they aged.
That's crazy.
I may have, but yeah, it was 7 years, if I recall.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of research, and it's a lot of time, but it's beautiful stuff. It's a great
it's still selling. I was somewhere and it was stocked. Oh, at the South Street Seaport near my apartment in New York, there's a wonderful bookstore, and there was the Catskills. And I said, I'm the author. And the cashier, beautiful young woman, said, we have to keep it in stock. Nice. So that's what makes an author's day.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, so, I mean, the crazy thing is, you talk about, when you published a book, it was blooming. I mean, like we also said that it was blooming even more nowadays. I have compared the last 6 years of when I've hiked here to the Borscht Belt. When I started hiking, there was houses abandoned everywhere. There's hotels abandoned everywhere, bungalows abandoned everywhere. And within the last 3 or 4 years, due to mostly COVID, of course, this place has been brought to life like that, like a snap of a finger. It's
terrific.
It's insane of what I've seen. And I've seen the history come back a lot. And I've seen people digging deep into the history, which is great. I mean, I fell in love with the Borscht Belt era, of course. I mean, why not fall in love with the era that brought so many people to the Catskills? I mean, it wasn't directly involved in the middle of the Catskills, but it was an influence to the towns.
Right.
So it's crazy. It's really cool to see that stuff. Now, when you did, of course, your research, it wasn't of course, just the internet. What did it involve? Libraries, interviews?
Yeah, I got people on the phone. There were experts. No, it wasn't all on the internet. Although I do have to say, if this didn't exist when I first started writing books, but the Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Berkeley libraries are all digitized.
Oh,
And man, does that help.
definitely.
So that, yeah, that was there. There were sources, there were real live people and people who owned houses there. Of course, the most colorful stories came out of the Borscht Belt.
Of
I
course.
talked to the old comics who were still alive, and they could go on and on
Yep.
and on and on.
I'm sorry not to be, but the Jewish love to talk and they love to go on and on about it. I would too.
Yeah, and they did. And it was the nostalgia factor. But I had to balance that because I wanted to go into the artists who were up there and the writers.
Mhm.
And with that, there were professors and there were art professors and there were artists, I suppose, that I know of. But their stories are legion. And, I would just talk to anyone I could find. In New York, there's no shortage of them. And someone knew someone who had a business up there or a restaurant up there. And, it's just the old researching and networking.
I mean, there was a lot. Was there a lot of like phone
I
interviews?
also did go there. I don't want to
Nice.
leave that part out, but there may be songs about this, but the trees don't really talk.
Of course. Now, of course, I like the local people. Were they surprised for you to be digging into this history?
No, and mostly I was in Woodstock and asking around there, and people who had been there were friends of friends. So I got a lot from them. No, everyone thought a book on the Catskills. Yeah, obviously, there had been books on the Catskills. There's Alf Evers or whatever,
Yep. Evers.
which is a doorstop. And I found it a little dry. And I didn't want to go that route. Although it's a highly, highly respected and should be book,
Mhm.
but it's not to my taste.
Yep.
And so no one questioned my doing it. They sort of questioned me doing it. Don't you write about showbiz? Yeah, but the entire world is showbiz. So yeah, it did change. It changed my life. This book, it made me something else.
Excellent.
Suddenly, I was also an historian.
Oh yeah.
I'm grateful.
Yeah. What would you think was the most complicated part of the book?
Well, trying to make the industries up there exciting to read. That was the challenge.
Yep.
Also, I'm not scientific. I'm not, fracking was tough for me to sort of digest.
Yeah.
And explain, and what was going on and how it was happening and what the effects it was having. But even tanning, it's not that interesting a process. It ruined forests up there, and originally it was done here in the city, and they moved it up there to get it. And it was polluting the water in Manhattan.
Oh, it was horrible.
And then we had the whole viaduct.
Yeah,
that was an enormous project. That chapter that may have taken a year in and of itself to write about the Manhattan water supply, which comes from the Catskills. The thing the way I constructed the book was to keep showing the Catskills relationship to New York City. That's what grounded really the structure of the book, without letting New York City take over the focus.
I mean,
on the Catskills.
New York City had a huge role in that, though.
Yeah, our streets were paved with the bluestone.
Yep.
From the Catskills.
The swamp was a huge, like, crazy thing that I remember reading about.
Right. And Thomas Cole, the Hudson River School, Yeah, the gallery was on Wall Street and Broadway, where he first started selling his paintings. But he had gone up to the Catskills, having read Washington Irving, and he wanted to see these places, and he painted them. And that lit the fire for people to start going up there. And then the railroads got involved,
Yep.
and they got the fish. Yeah, they would stock the lakes with fish to get fishermen. All this is fascinating stuff to go up there. And the railroads would, if you wanted to build a cabin or a house, better yet, a house up there, the railroads would transport your lumber for free.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So it was really the development of New York State.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Catskills were responsible.
New York State in America, like you said.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
I mean, the Delaware Ulster was the first railroad built, correct?
Yeah,
And
I do believe.
yeah, and it was like the cool thing is like I always say this on almost every, as you can hear my dogs barking, they are freaking insane. Sorry. Um, I say this on almost every podcast. So like every time I think of this is like there's so many times that the Catskills have changed and led one thing to another. I mean, you talk about making the tanning industry seem positive. It really wasn't. It was
No, it
just,
polluted.
it's
But it gave us
disgusting.
leather goods, supple leather goods. We should explain that tanning isn't sitting under a sunlight
Yeah.
bed.
Yeah,
The tanning is the process by which the rawhides, which were imported from South America, the leather goods, would be shipped to the Catskills. And there was a special fluid that the bark of the trees was stripped, and they called it an alcohol,
Yep.
the potion that
An acid.
was used. Yeah. And that would break down the toughness of the hides. And you'd have beautiful wallets and shoes and boots and purses. And
But then it would lead to cutting the trees down and then throwing all that stuff in the rivers. So it was
Yeah.
it was a crazy time.
yeah, it was bad stuff,
It
not
was,
ecological.
yeah, it was great for the history and for the people, the locals to work.
The
But it was,
economy.
yeah, but it was horrible for
Yeah.
the forest and everything else. And then, but then after that was dead, it led to the beautiful fly fishing of the Catskills.
Right.
Like you said, the dropping of the fishes and stuff like
Well,
that, the eggs.
And the most successful industry that was ever up there was the hospitality industry.
Yep.
Which essentially was born there.
Yep. Exactly. And like you said, the Catskills, a lot of people think like out west was the beginning of America or New York City and stuff like that. It was New York City was
I did. I thought, last of the Mohicans, I thought, well, it's cowboys and Native Americans. It has to take place in Arizona or someplace. The Wild West. Well, the Wild West was west of New York City, the
Yep.
Catskills.
Yep, exactly. Nice
Yeah.
way to say that. Good way to turn things around. So I think we kind of went over what do you think was the most complicated time in the Catskills? I don't know how if that's an
Yeah, no. It was the transitional period. As I said, when the Catskill Mountain House opened in 1824, it established a certain level of hospitality. It established a certain level of clientele, and it was restricted. And unless you were white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, you are not welcome. Our hotels and boarding houses will keep you out. And it was a policy that was enforced. It caused Fleischmann to buy the yeast maker, to buy an entire town, which is called Fleischmann's today,
Yeah.
and build his home there. And so the transitional time, what happened was people were dying of tuberculosis. It was beyond the COVID of its time, or I suppose they were on an equal par.
Yeah.
All over the world. Nobody knew how to treat it. Doctors in New York City, it was respiratory, TB. Consumptives were the patients. That's what they were called. And the doctors didn't know what to do with them. And they thought they would send the patients down south, thinking a warm climate would help their lungs. No, they would die instantly.
Oh.
And what was discovered in Switzerland was putting these people outside in the cold mountain clean air.
Yeah.
And it worked. So this noble experiment moved to the Adirondacks, and the same thing applied. It worked. It cleared out the lungs. So then the question was, would it work in the Catskills? Does it have the same sort of air as Switzerland and the Adirondacks? And it did. And to boot, it was closer to New York City, which meant the patients, it was easier for them to get to the remedy place. It was also believed that tuberculosis was genetic. So nobody was really worried at first. Well, then it was discovered, no, tuberculosis is highly contagious. So those who could sell their businesses did so immediately. And in the hotels, people were dying, and the hotel owners would have special arrangements with the morticians to sneak the corpses out in the middle of the night. People would wake up the next morning at breakfast, oh, what happened to Mr. Brown? And the hotel owner would say, he was called away on business. Then word got out, this was a killer. So those who couldn't sell their homes or their hotels simply abandoned. This is about 1900. And really from 1900 to 1914, that's the transitional period. And the real estate prices plummeted. And suddenly the group of people who had not been allowed to go to the Catskills, the Jews, went to the Catskills. And that's how it became what it became. And there were no industries that they could make money at, except to open boarding houses for other Jews to come enjoy fresh air, fresh eggs and milk and bread and
entertainment.
Well, that came. Yeah. That
later
just
on.
all gradually developed because they're there for the weekend. What are you going to do on a Saturday night?
Yeah.
So either they would put on their own plays or they would hire, there was a tradition of Jewish humor, laughing at, the hardships that they had faced in life. So, it was there. The seed was planted and it just flourished in the Catskills until I'm jumping over a lot of time and developments here. But what happened was at the end of World War II, for the first time ever in American history, there was a Jewish middle class and Jews with money, and they wanted to spend it. And the rest of the country still, it was a country club mentality, which meant no Jews. Mm-hmm. So this is why you had the Grossinger's Hotel and Country Club, the Concord Hotel and Country Club, Kutcher's Hotel and Country Club. The Jews had their own country clubs up there, and they had the best entertainment. They had the best food. The portions never ended. And, the talent that was there, you would then see Sunday nights on the Ed Sullivan Show. Yeah. So it was altering the culture. And anyway, that's the great transitional period. Complicated, yes. And then it ended because it had run its time. Yep. And the next generation didn't want to work that hard. It was also the mid-60s. You had air conditioning. So you really weren't forced to go to the hotel. Women entered the workplace. Mm-hmm. So they weren't going to spend the entire summer watching the kids while their husbands were back in town having affairs with their secretaries. And but also the women would, have affairs with the waiters up at the hotels while the husbands were away. That went on too.
Well, that's some different stories.
Yes. And there was the flight to the suburbs. People had their own swimming pools. And Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, which meant all these exclusive country clubs around the country could no longer restrict Jews. But there was also cheap airfare to Europe.
Yep.
Fly now, pay later. So the hotels started crumbling.
Yeah, and that's
just continued to crumble.
That's unfortunate.
Into the 80s, and then it was over. Period.
Over. It's seriously. Yeah. It took a good 10 years to get over, but it felt like with the way it's described in books and everything else, it felt like instant. It's gone.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that fast. But you have to remember, nobody. It was the 60s, so by the mid 60s, it all started to go. In 16, but yet the hotels were still doing their thing. You still had the comic Henny Youngman coming up there and saying, "Take my wife, please," and Alan King doing mother-in-law jokes and all this sort of old. Meanwhile, in 1969, up in the Catskills, Woodstock takes place. So if you really needed to see where was the generation gap, you had it in the Catskills.
Crazy. That's so crazy. Amazing. But like, there's so much up there. There's geologically all the way to today. It's just so much in the Catskills. I mean, you could find a lot about other places. You know, we got the Adirondacks, the White Mountains, stuff like that, but nothing like the Catskills. Nothing as it evolved from the early start of the white man in America to now. I mean, it's insane. It's really crazy. And of course, my favorite time, of course, to read about is the Borscht Belt, because it's just there's so much fascinating parts about it. It flourished. The hotels were magnificent, high class. Some of them weren't high class, but they were still magnificent.
You had to wear, gentlemen you had to dress for dinner. Men in coat and ties, women in dresses. And the head waiters really acted as matchmakers too. We got to go into that. How,
Really?
If families would, the same families would come season after season. And, so the head waiters would know their children, especially available daughters, because the bus boys would be law students and medical students, and they would earn their tuition from the tips. I just spoke to a group of retired doctors from Bellevue Hospital, and one guy said that every summer from his tips, he made his $1,000 med school tuition. And he said,
wow,
I don't know how anybody does that today, because how do you make $350,000?
yeah. I was just going to ask that. What's the price of back in the '60s when you made $1,000? Good Lord.
Yeah, right.
Wow. And that's also, I had a friend that I interviewed here about the Borscht Belt, and he was a photographer down there, and he would take pictures of couples. He's like, I'm the photographer. He worked at the Neville.
Right.
And he would take pictures of the couples and stuff like that. And I don't know if he ever said something about the husband cheating on the wife, but he would always take pictures of them. And it was just, he said,
and they sold these. You're not old enough. I remember them in the 50s. They were the little plastic. You looked in them and you held it up to the light. It was a slide inside, and you'd see yourself sitting at the table at the Concord, or the Neville, which was 11 spelled backward. It wasn't an indigenous American name, and it wasn't an Italian name. There were 11 school teachers who picnicked on the ground, so they spelled 11 backwards, and that's how the Neville got it.
Wow,
Kutcher's
that's new.
was the one where if you like sports, you went to Kutcher's. And Wilt Chamberlain was raised by Mrs. Kutcher. He was the bellhop, and he was so tall that even if your room was on the second floor, you could just open your window and he would pass you your luggage.
Nice. Where was Mel Brooks located? He did stuff up there too, correct?
Yeah, Mel Brooks worked in a bungalow colony.
Okay.
He was very young. He was 16. And I don't know the name of it. He's the funniest man alive. And he tells great stories of starting out up there. And he was what they called a tumbler. And that was someone who just kept the guests entertained from morning to night. And if the single daughters didn't have a dance partner, the tumbler would have to dance with them at night. But during the day, he would be making jokes all the time, which Mel Brooks is the master. And what he would do is he'd walk over to the pool, all dressed up like he had just arrived, and with his suitcase, which he filled with rocks. And he would walk into the pool. They'd say, "Hey, business." And then he said, because he only knows how to add to a joke, he said, and then I remembered I couldn't swim. Anyway, that was, he was there, and he trained there. They all trained there, and they were known to be the toughest audiences on the planet, the guests of those hotels. And they would brag about who they walked out on. I walked out on Henny Youngman. Well, I walked out on Barbara Streisand.
Oh, wow.
And all these people got their starts up there. Sid Caesar, married the daughter of the owner of one of the lodges. And he wasn't up there as a comic since Caesar played the saxophone. So the
Seinfeld, right?
showbiz stories are endless.
Yeah,
I mean, they've been books unto themselves.
yeah, and it's crazy, amazing. You got to hook me up with Mel Brooks, by the way. I'd love to. I'd love to hear his stories.
95 now.
He's
And
95 now.
yeah, he's isolated. Yeah, he's in California.
Oh, I'm isolated as well. I'm in New York, so
Oh yeah,
hook me up with him. I'd love to hear his stories about the Borscht Belt.
yeah.
That would be so cool. Anybody's old, if you have any old timers that would love to talk about that, please hook me up, because I just find those stories fascinating of what they used to do during the days and who they met. It was great stuff.
We'll talk.
Excellent. So,
Yeah.
what's your favorite time in the Catskills, by the way?
Time of year?
Well, yeah,
Well, anywhere, but the period.
yeah, your time of history.
If I had Mr. Peabody in the Wayback Machine,
Uh-huh.
I'd go to the Gangster Era, the 20s, Prohibition.
And that's when all the guys from New York City would flee up here to hide,
Yeah.
or
And you could get it, there were distilleries up there because you could hide them. And you could hide bodies. That was another big lure for the gangsters. And they would have fire hoses pumping beer into the restaurants.
Interesting.
But yeah, I wish I had seen the Borscht Belt, of course.
Yeah,
I did go with my parents to Vegas in the 60s, and the Vegas hotels were we know were built by gangsters.
Yep.
And in the 60s, they were still running them. And they modeled themselves on Grossingers and later, so did Disney World and the cruise ships, because whatever you needed, you never had to leave the gate. From gasoline to an evening dress. It was all on the property. And so I got a bit of a taste seeing it as a child in Vegas, but I'd like to have experienced the whole thing. I wouldn't have gone for the food. I was a very picky eater as a child, but I'd like to have seen it.
Yeah, but what about like the gangster era that intrigued you? Like just of the stories of them coming up and fleeing and
I'm not the only one. There's a reason The Godfather, it's a great movie, but there's a reason we're intrigued. And The Sopranos. We want to know about the darker side of life without we want our noses pressed against those windows, but we don't want to be involved with them because God help you.
Yeah.
But aren't they fascinating to watch? And that's how I felt about that chapter in the book. There's a reason for the reader interest, movie audience interest.
Yeah, you're right.
You want to be taken out of yourself. And, these people aren't like we are.
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I can't wait to reread that again. Because there's so much I remember.
There'll be a pop quiz in the morning. I'm kidding.
Well, I got to wake up at 3:45, so that's I don't think I'll be alive. But excellent. So I'll have to reread that and check out that time, because it sounds fascinating once again. Now, do you ever, like, you've gone to the Catskills, do you ever have a favorite spot in the Catskills?
Well, my editor's house, and my agent actually has a house there. Favorite spot. What I do was when I drive up there, I'll stop and pull over for any waterfall.
Good call.
I am an absolute sucker for waterfalls, and you've got them up there.
Oh yeah.
So those would have to be my favorite spots.
Nice. That's a great time to stop. The waterfall is definitely enjoyable. Number one, because it's, even if you're in the summer, it's air conditioned with the mist of the falls.
Yeah.
So, but excellent. Yeah. I mean, there's so many places to enjoy up here. I mean, Phoenicia.
Yeah. Narrowsburg is charming.
Yeah.
Callicoon is charming.
Yep.
I like charm.
Yeah. Arkville, Margaretville. I love all those places in the southern western part. I mean, I'm close to there. They're just, hopefully, like you said, hopefully they're coming back to life. I'd like to see.
They definitely are.
Yeah. And I'd like to see a little bit more storefronts.
Although I talked to my agent today, she said it was 9 degrees up there.
Yes. I woke up, it was 8 degrees here at my place.
Oh, see, well, she's in a heat wave belt.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oneonta, we're lucky sometimes. So,
Yeah.
but excellent. That's some great information. And I'm glad you enjoyed me tonight. I'm fascinated by your book. Hopefully.
I can't thank you enough. That you're like a shot of adrenaline.
Oh, well, excellent. I mean, this is a shot of adrenaline because it keeps me awake at night. But I love it, and I'm glad you could join me. I didn't know, I had my doubts that a famous person like you would join me on a small podcast like this. So things could happen.
Oh, don't be silly. Listen, I was a journalist. I was a journalist on my high school newspaper, and I thought I demanded as much respect as the reporter from Time magazine. So there's no bigger and there's no small, and you never know who you're going to reach.
Yeah.
And it's important. So keep doing what you're doing, and I'll keep doing what I'm doing.
Please do.
And we'll do this again.
Yes, definitely. If you have anything you want to talk about or stuff like that, pour out some information, please.
Well, if you want to hike through an amusement park, I can help you. But
an abandoned one?
Mostly about sitting down and being strapped in.
Do you go through the abandoned ones?
No.
Oh, okay. Like we'll have to go through an abandoned like Kushner's or Grossinger's or stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
I don't. That's not what I don't want to write depressing books. I don't want to skip over what really happened, and I don't. But don't focus on derelict. Focus on what was the golden age, and how can we emulate it? How can we adapt it today, and use it to our own benefit? I don't think there's nothing to be gained from looking at algae and graffiti.
Yep.
At this beautiful pool that was built by this remarkable woman, Jenny Grossinger, who had to leave school when she was in the 4th grade to help support her family and her girlfriends. She was lucky. She worked in her family's restaurant. Her girlfriends went to work in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, and they were all incinerated when that went up in smoke. So yeah, I don't like abandoned. I'm not into abandonment.
And I look at the Borscht Belt as a growth time, and I look at it as the time when everything flourished. And I love to see pictures of people smiling, the big hotels, everybody enjoying life.
They were
in the Catskills. Yeah, in the Catskills. Yeah. But once again, thank you for joining me. Again, thank you, my sponsor, Senior Crowd Guiding. Thank the donors. Thank you very much for the donors. Thank everyone who is listening. I really appreciate it. I hope you're enjoying this. Subscribe on any platform. Look me up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I have a website. If you have a time, shoot me a review. Check out Stephen's book. You can probably purchase it anywhere. I think I purchased it in a local bookstore, but you can get it on Amazon. It's called The Catskills: Its History and How It Changed America. Phenomenal book. The history of the Catskills is beyond the limits of your brain. So take it day by day. But thank you so much for joining me, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was great. Really
I had a great time, and I hope you did too as well.
I did. I thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And you. I woke up. I didn't need the call.
Right? So good. It could be good for your next interview.